Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this joint meeting of the Early Childhood and Education Subcommittees of the House Ways and Means Committee. It is March 15th, just after 2 p.m. We have one item of joint business between these two subcommittees, after which the Early Childhood Subcommittee will be done. But my understanding is that the Education Subcommittee will be continuing on this same live stream for the remainder of their business. So first up is House Bill 770, which is in the purview of the Early Childhood Subcommittee. This is the chair's bill having to do with which children qualify for priority access in terms of the pre-K expansion. Delegate Ebersol, would you like to talk about the amendments that are not related to the underlying bill first, and then we'll circle back on what was in HB 770?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So there are two bills that have elements of them. They're very small elements of them that we want to include. One is House Bill 306, which changes the membership of, Alistair, you have to tell me the name of it's a very long name for the group, and adds a guidance counselor to this group that was established by the blueprint. Are you looking for it, Alistair?
Sorry, and looking for my unmute button. It's the Maryland Consortium on Coordinated Community Support.
It has to do with actually mental health. And I happen to be one of the serving members. But the bill would add a counselor to the people who serve on that and need to be appointed to that. And that's that entire one. But I think we can offer these both as one amendment. The other one is a piece of a House Bill 838, which had a lot of things in it, most of which we're not going to act on, but two of which we are. In the blueprint, there was language surrounding a assistant principal's duties that they had to spend 20% of their time. At the time, it said in classroom activities, and the rest of their time in things that were classroom related. Well, that really was I'm sure it was just a language problem, but the problem there is that assistant principals have other jobs to do. So we've changed the language and made sure it's clear that the assistant principal will be in a classroom setting, not just sitting in the back watching, but they'll be in direct contact with students, because that was the original intent there. And we thought the language was a little weak. But then we say they'll spend the rest of their time doing other things. And among them will be, you want to tell me what those two things are, Alistair, that we left in?
Yes. So under the career ladder established by the blueprint, they had to spend, in addition to teaching in the classroom for 20% of the time, spend the remaining of the time on teacher activities. And so this has changed to say spend a portion of their time on activities, including setting priorities for subject level department of the school and fulfilling specialized roles such as the head of a professional development.
In other words, being leaders of teachers. And so we said, they have to do their job being leaders. And it didn't even say they have to spend all their time doing that. Sometimes they spend their time doing discipline or, various other things. So we took part of that, we amended it a bit. And so that's the other part of the amendment. So the two things are changing the membership of that consortium and also defining more carefully the responsibilities of an assistant principal. And then also, I'm just double checking. There was language about curriculum running, but we're putting that off for now, correct?
No, that's in the amendments before you, I think.
Thank you. I'm sorry. It has to do with the idea was that there would be a certain group of teachers who would qualify to be curriculum writers. The general feeling is it was a little too restrictive on who could, and we wouldn't get many people to write curriculum. We were going to change that language, but what we've done is we've put off the institution of that language for 3 years, I guess.
3 years from now, 2 years from the date at which it might be established under.
So that we'll think about how we can be more inclusive and get more people to be curriculum writers, but for now we can just wait. Pretty good description. Okay, since I'm not actually chairing this committee, I can now move the amendments. So I would like to move the amendments.
Second the amendment.
Okay, so those amendments have been moved and seconded. I will say procedurally, the amendments, I believe, are all in one amendment for including the amendments on the underlying bill, HB 770. So we'll pause here. Are there questions about the amendments that Delegate Ebersol just described? Yes, Delegate Mercury North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Forgive me, I'm looking at the amendments and I saw, I'm getting this right, but I saw an amendment regarding homeless youth or something like that added. Is that another amendment, or I just missed the vote on that?
Yes, we'll discuss that part in a moment. So that is
okay. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure we were talking about all the amendments or what. Okay.
So we're going to take them separately.
I don't have any questions based upon that.
Okay. Any other questions on the amendments that were just described? Okay, so seeing none, so then there are additional amendments. Again, this is presented as one package of amendments. So the other amendments relate to
Are we going to take a vote on the amendment?
It is not a separate amendment, so we will actually need to describe the remainder of what is in that same amendment, Delegate Hornberger, but thank you for the procedural point. So yeah, so there will be a vote on the entire set of amendments once we describe the other part of the amendments.
Thank you.
No worries. So yes, so the other part of the amendments have to do with the underlying bill, HB 770, and this is publicly funded full day pre-K and which children are prioritized for the expansion of that program. And Alistair, I'll let you go ahead and describe those portion of the amendments.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as the underlying bill came in, the way that the publicly funded pre-K under the blueprint works is there are 3 tiers. There is and they're income based on the income of the family of the 3 or 4-year-old. The first tier, tier 1, is for children who are at 300, whose families are at 300% or below of the poverty line. The second tier, tier 2, is for families who are between 300 and 600% of the poverty line. And tier 3 is for families who are above 600% of the poverty line. So the way the bill came in is it changed the definition of tier 1 to not just be about income, but also about whether the child had a disability, was homeless, or from a home in which English was not the primarily spoken language. So these amendments, do you want me to pause, Madam Chair, or finish discussion?
Go ahead, keep going.
Okay, thank you. So these amendments remove that new definition for the tier 1 students, leaving in place the students who are homeless. So they are now included in tier 1, and there are certain things that the publicly funded pre-K is phased in over the course of several years as the blueprint itself is phased in. But the first group that is treated is the tier 1 students. So in addition, in this bill, tier 1 students are eligible to attend school starting this school year to start attending publicly funded pre-K. In 2025-26, if there are slots available under current law, then tier 2 students are eligible to attend if there is space available. The amendments say that for tier 2 children, meaning those who are at 300 to 600% of the poverty line, if they are children with disabilities or if they are children from homes in which English is the primary spoken language, those students may attend school starting next year. And for that 1 year, the schools will be reimbursed the count of students for the funding formula, and the school and the public and private pre-Ks will be reimbursed at a rate set for tier 1 students for that year. Then starting with the following school year, those students will be able to continue to enroll. So it's not the case that programs will only adopt them if there are slots available. Those students are eligible to attend pre-K. Additionally, because the definition of tier 1 was changed, priority in expanding grants under the original blueprint language said that priority should be given to tier 1 children, children with disabilities regardless of their income, homeless children, and children from homes in which English was not the primary spoken language. That was taken out in the bill as it came before you because it was redundant with the tier 1 children, but that's been added back in except for the homeless youth, which remains redundant. And I believe that encompasses all of the amendments.
Thank you. So just to emphasize here, what we've done is we are maintaining the tier 1 and 2 income brackets, but adding homeless youth to tier 1. And then for that next economic bracket, we are including children whose families would otherwise income qualify, but who have a disability or who don't speak English at home. And they basically are going to get access to the full day publicly funded pre-K 1 year earlier than they do under current statute. Do I have that right?
Yes, and they're under current statute, they wouldn't necessarily be guaranteed in the following year. So they're now guaranteed next year and guaranteed going forward.
Thank you. Delegate Hornberger or perhaps Delegate Miller.
Yes, thank you, Hornberger. So just anecdotally, in my county, obviously this is novel, so it's undersubscribed. Even after, open enrollment, it was still under subscribed. So my question is, if you're not in tier 1, you're not in tier 2, but you still want to participate and there's a slot open, do you have the ability to enroll a full day?
It's up to the counties who are setting the up to the memorandum of understanding between the county boards, the private providers, and the State Department of Education. But yes, if it's undersubscribed, they should be able to open up new slots and allow others to enroll.
Okay, and then will they be eligible for the reimbursement?
The reimbursement rate is still based on your income, unless
okay.
if they're a family that is a tier 2 family who has a student with a disability, or a student who is from a home where English is spoken as a second language, they will be eligible, but otherwise it is dependent on their income.
And then does the jurisdiction have the ability to decline a student because they don't come with those subsidies?
I'm not sure I understand. So can eligible pre-K program not accept a student because they are not in this group? Is that
Yes.
the question?
So if there's a pin left over, a parent shows up, they don't meet any of these categories, but they still want to enroll, can the school system decline them?
I think it's up to the memorandum of understanding that's established there. I would hope that they would be enrolling them, because the whole idea is to hopefully get as many students in place, but I'm not sure what the exact memorandum of understanding says in each county.
And this might also be relevant that in circumstances where the state the state and local cost share funding formula doesn't come into play, I believe that the families can pay their own full share.
Okay.
So in a situation maybe like where you're talking about, where the student may not be
Like
eligible for the state funding, I think the family can just pay their full fare.
Oh yeah, that's part of it. It's in that third bill. Third bill's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, my concern here is that there are slots that are not being utilized. Someone wants to participate, they're a taxpayer, citizen in the community, and because they don't come with these bennies or these subsidies, they're being excluded from the pre-K. And again, this is only if there is a slot available.
Right, and I think that's where it probably varies a lot from county to county, because in some jurisdictions they are oversubscribed. There are not enough providers to provide the seats for the students who are supposed to be eligible, even with the state funding at this point.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is the appropriate venue, but I'd like to make a motion that jurisdictions can't decline enrollment if there are slots available during the, and there can be a sunset on that too, because we do have undersubscription in some of these counties.
I do not hear a second for that motion.
Oh, I'll second. That's fine. It's Delegate Miller.
Right.
I'll second.
Procedurally, I might just go to Delegate Ebersol here.
Here I am. I actually had a suggestion also for an amendment, but I would say if this is going to get messy, it would be okay for us to separate out those first two amendments and just put those on and then go here.
Yeah, great.
Would that be okay with you, Delegate Hornberger, for us to take up the underlying amendments and come back? Okay, thank you. We appreciate that. Delegate Henson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this still the appropriate time to ask questions about the amendments that were just presented?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Unlike my colleagues' county, Anne Arundel County has had an issue with capacity and making sure that there are enough providers and there are enough spaces for students, because there is a great need and a great interest in the county. Do we know how the inclusion of the additional eligibility groups, what that is likely to do in terms of capacity for the programs?
I mean, I'll say generally, and then Alistair is welcome to jump in, that capacity certainly is an issue in certain jurisdictions. The bill before us does not create extra seats, so this is all subject to capacity being available for the students.
I understand. So with the first tier, it is my understanding that the first tier is more or less guaranteed at a certain point. Is it guaranteed if there's capacity? And then in that case, would it be a first come, first serve?
Yeah, so tier 1 is at least according to the intent of the legislation in this current school year, tier 1 is supposed to be, there's supposed to be enough seats to be adopted for tier 1 students. So there is funding provided for that. If there are not enough private providers, the State Department of Education can issue waivers and take those students up in public school slots. And the same thing would apply for next year for the tier 2 students who fall into these other 2 populations and going forward for those students.
I understand. Thank you very much. May I also make sure that I'm understanding correctly how the funding is operationalized to our private providers? Is it administered like a grant, or does the parent get a subsidy? How does that work with the funding for the privates?
It follows the student and goes to the private providers from the comptroller's office. I'm not entirely sure about the exact nature of the paperwork, but I think it operates in much the same way that a public school does, where they're quarterly. I think in a public school, they're, 6 times a year or so, money is issued out to the public schools from the comptroller's office based on the characteristics and number of students that you have before you. And a similar thing happens in this case to the eligible private pre-K providers. I would also note that to the issue of the criteria for eligible pre-K providers, there was language in House Bill 1219, the Governor's Education Shortage Act, that was meant to address that, to make the qualifications for educators a little bit easier for private providers to get into the system. But that does not go into effect until the 2025, 2026, that whole group of criteria that eligible providers have to meet until that year.
Thank you, Alistair. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Delegate Ebersol.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm going to muddy the water a little bit here. I hear tell that sometimes these are undersubscribed. I would like to make the suggestion that the amendment include that if they are undersubscribed, that priority be given to students with disabilities to fill those undersubscribed seats. Since we had them in the bill pretty largely before, and they're still there to a lesser extent. It's a suggestion. I would move an amendment if there was interest, but I'm going to make it a suggestion first for you.
I don't think that's necessary. I think that is current law, and this amendment restores that current law. So under current law, you have to provide, in providing new slots, you have to give preference to tier 1 students with disabilities, regardless of their children with disabilities, regardless of their the income of their families, students from homes which English is not spoken, and homeless youth. And so under this set of amendments, that remains intact. Only the homeless youth part is struck because that is now part of the definition of tier 1.
Okay, thank you.
And I would point colleagues, if you're following along, is on page 7 of the reprint where that restoration of the existing language and statute remains in the bill. Delegate Miracle North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess to the conversation about when these spots will be filled up, and the priority being homeless youth, is there a particular definition of homeless youth? I say that because, when a kid pre-K, whatever, walks in and there's some sort of disability, or there is some, English spoken language, that is more easily identifiable possibly than homeless youth, in my view. Sometimes people walk into school and you just don't know they're homeless until they outright say it. So is there a way, I don't know of an amendment, I'm just this is a conversation. Is there a way to specify how one is defined, whether it's through, filling out something with maybe the free or reduced meal program? I don't know. I'm just really brainstorming here as to a way to possibly better identify those homeless youth.
Thank you, Delegate Miracle North, for raising that issue. There's not a specific definition in the bill or in the amendments. So I think this would fall on the local districts in terms of doing that identification. My guess would be in a lot of cases, we'd see this playing out through the other family support programs that exist in a particular jurisdiction, where if they are aware of a family with 3 or 4 year olds, that they would be getting directed to the program. But Alistair, if you have additional information.
Yeah, it's a term of art that's used throughout the education article, and it means basically a youth who's identified under the federal McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. I don't know what the definition is under that federal law, but that's the meaning, I believe.
That's good. Thank you for that direction.
Delegate Vogel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a clarification, I think we might have already gone over this, but I'm still a little lost on this. Children with disabilities currently fall under, for funding, fall under tier 1 or tier 2?
Under the
Under
amendments,
current-
tier 2.
So and right now, what do they fall under?
Under
They are
current
not-
law,
okay.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
They are not, if they were income eligible, they would just be under any of those tiers, but they are included as a priority group for placement, just more generally.
Got it, regardless of income status.
Right.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I really appreciate the amendment. I changed some language in terms of scope. So Mr. Johnson, is that Johnson, right? Never pronounced your last name before. So does that change the calculation of physical impact?
Yes.
What's the change there?
Yes, so as the bill came in, the fiscal note writer estimated that it would cost the state roughly $12 million a year. I can't say exactly what this impact would be, but it would be a lot less, and it would be a limited time effect in next fiscal year, and then I think it would mostly get absorbed into the cost going forward that is already established for the blueprint. It depends a little bit on, because we're now guaranteeing that these slots be there for these students. And if that wasn't the case in the past, that might increase the fiscal note slightly. But I believe it should be some significantly less than the $12 million and mostly only in fiscal year 2024.
I see. I'm glad we take a more prudent way to really get the program like moving forward. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Delegate Wu. Delegate Grossman.
Sure, I don't have a question. I just wanted to, for everybody's GWAS file, let you know McKinney-Vento are homeless students who are literally homeless, kids that are living in hotels, kids that may be doubled up in households that they are, unstably housed in, those living in campgrounds or cars, and those living in homeless shelters. So that's who was captured as a youth who was homeless.
Thank you for that additional context. Any other questions or discussions on the package of amendments that are before us before we'll vote on that, and then we'll go back to Delegate Hornberger's amendment. Okay, not seeing any other questions or discussion. I don't recall, have we moved the set of amendments? Let's take a motion anyways.
I'll move the additional amendments to the first.
I
one.
second.
Move the first group, but we'll move
Okay, thank you. So the amendments have been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Okay, anyone wish to be recorded in opposition or abstaining? All right,
My
so those set of
apologies, ma'am.
amendments.
My apologies, Madam Chair. I got lost. Whose amendment were we focusing on?
These are the committee amendments that we're voting on.
Okay, I thought we were on I thought Hornberger had an amendment, and that's where I got
We will
lost.
go to that next.
Okay, sorry. Then yes, please record me in the
Okay, thank you. So the committee amendments have been adopted. Delegate Hornberger, would you like to restate your amendment, please? I know it has already been moved and seconded, but if you can just re-describe for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just the amendment makes sure that the program is fully subscribed in our jurisdictions that might not have enough enrollment. So all it would say is that after tier 1, tier 2, or anyone that has a preferential enrollment credentials is spoken for, if there's still or slots left over, that other folks that don't meet those criteria couldn't be discriminated against.
And so under those amendments, you would anticipate that those families who are not eligible for any of the state/local subsidy, that they would be paying for themselves. Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you for that clarification. Other questions or discussion on this amendment? Delegate Henson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would the amendment apply to private providers as well? Let's say MSDE said your student to teacher ratio is X number and X number, and a private provider could take on 4 or 5 more children. Would the non-discriminatory amendment mean that a private provider would be required to take other children as well?
Delegate
I bel-
Hornberger, I was going to say, as the maker of the amendment, Delegate Hornberger, you're free to jump in and to answer any of these questions.
Yeah, I'm not understanding how the slots get determined. I'm assuming that's some sort of approval process. And that's determined, I would hope that's determined before enrollment begins.
What I'm trying to avoid is a new regulation on the private providers, or understand if that's the intent of the amendment so it can inform my vote on it. If a private provider is able to take on 16 kids and they have 10, and the bill says you can't discriminate beyond those qualifiers, would it then obligate private providers who had additional capacity to accept additional students?
Yeah, so it's actually the exact opposite. So what's happening with the private providers, we met earlier this session with Delegate Greist, is that the private providers are driving down their enrollment numbers because they can't guarantee that these slots are going to be filled because of these criteria that have been put forward. So they're actually under-reporting how many they can take on based on budgetary estimates. So this will give them leeway to say that they can accept folks that don't meet tier 1 or tier 2.
I'm not sure I understand. I think there's some areas where it may be a different issue in terms of capacity. And if it was, I just want to be sure that I'm clear about the intent of the amendment.
It's all about projecting their staff load. So you have to have a certain number of adults there per pupil. And unless they have guaranteed tier 1 and tier 2, they are shuttering slots because they're afraid they're going to have to lay off staff or won't be able to continuously keep them employed. So what this amendment would do would be able to say, you can go after those other students in your community, which they know this better than anybody else, and not have to worry about not receiving the funds.
I understand. Thank you.
Yep.
Delegate Wu.
They wouldn't receive the funds if that's.
Thank you. I think my understanding is Delegate Hornberger is talking about a situation. The provider may feel there's not enough enrollment based on this criteria. So they don't know how to stop their school, right? So by expanding their opportunity to enroll other students, they will be able to really stop their school. Is that right?
Sorry, you have to repeat that.
So it's really about how to make this more applicable to the business situation. For example, the provider, they're afraid to open a class, right? Because they're afraid the enrollment is not enough. So by enrollment students who are not from this criteria, they'll be able to fill the class and they can really stop in the classroom, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So basically what this amendment seeks to do is just to make sure that we are capitalizing, utilizing all of the providers that we have and get as many children, regardless of their tier, into the pre-K as possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that sounds makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Vogel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Hornberger, I guess my main concern here is that we could be creating an incentive for school districts to seek out those students who'd be able to pay instead of those students who are tier 1 or tier 2, essentially creating less slots for them and more slots for the students that can pay. I just, have you considered that potential unintentional consequence here?
Yeah, that's a valid point, but and I don't know if there's a way to set a point in time. But if it's already identified that no one's seeking those slots, maybe that's a week or 2 out or a month out from the enrollment date, then those slots are left on the table. They're not being utilized, and children are missing out on the opportunity for pre-K.
Okay, I'm going to assume best intent by the school districts, but again, even if you set that date or whatever that deadline is there a scenario where maybe school districts are a little less aggressive to advertise this program to tier 1 and tier 2 students, just to see if?
No, because then they risk losing everything. I mean, the students that are in tier 1, that's guaranteed reimbursement. So they are seeking those out actively. They're just reluctant to have these extra slots because, there's ambiguities about the program, and there's the folks just aren't signing up. So again, this is probably more for the rural jurisdictions than anything else. I think most of your concentration of population areas are oversubscribed. It's just, this is an anecdote from my district.
Actually, I'm going to take the prerogative of being the chair and ask a question. If any of our stakeholders have information on what enrollment is like in the public full day pre-K programs and which jurisdictions might be undersubscribed, does anyone have information on that? You're welcome to come on camera or raise your hand. Don't see anyone who has that information. So in that case, I will move on. Delegate Mercure North. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Mr. McSherry, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple things. I mean, I think Delegate Hornberger is correct. I think it's all across the board. I think we are ramping up. We're still very much in the process of ramping up pre-K enrollment via the blueprint. So I think the experience is going to vary greatly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I would say, as I understand Delegate Hornberger's amendment, and my apologies, I don't see anything in front of me, so I don't really know how exactly this would work, but it sounds to me like it's binding on the school systems, not on individual providers. So I think some of the concerns that this might have a negative impact on individual providers are probably not accurate. I think if anything, it could help as Delegate Hornberger lays out, could help in some cases, could help private providers who are participating in delivery of public pre-K. But it's so, I apologize again, it's a little hard to conceptualize this without seeing it.
Thank you for that information. Delegate Mercure North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with Mr. Sherry. I'm trying to conceptualize it myself. Delegate Hornberger, maybe it's a question for all of you, especially because I'm still trying to understand the reimbursement aspect. Is the reimbursement an incentive to bring on the tier 1, tier 2 students, or it's an incentive to fill up these spaces for pre-K? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, so my understanding from the providers that we met with earlier this year is that they sort of already identified these students that are eligible for the reimbursement in tier 1, tier 2. They have wraparound services already. They have siblings. So they've already identified them and got them enrolled. It's just in order to do the full complement, they in some cases need extra students who are not tier 1 or tier 2, because again, this is a small minority of the population. And then we're leaving these slots on the table and not getting utilized. So that was my understanding from the presenters earlier this year.
Okay.
And what our school system did was they as in essence did what I'm offering. They opened it to everyone who had an age student that wanted to come. And that was after the enrollment had started.
And they still get the reimbursement.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Okay.
I would just clarify that the eligibility for the reimbursement is set in statute, and under the amendment that we're proposing here, this would not change who is eligible for the state / local funding for that. So that's still set and largely determined by income, but as we adopted in the other amendments, would be set for those other groups as well.
And again, it's my belief, as you know, as time goes on, this will no longer be an issue because everyone will know who has a child of that age. I can enroll my student, my son, my daughter, in the pre-K. It's just right now it's undersubscribed, and we want to get kids into the system as quickly as soon as possible.
Okay, I hear you. I'm stuck on the reimbursement. So like, you only get reimbursement if you're not able to get the money from these tier 1, tier 2 students because they can't afford it. So you have someone who can't afford it is getting the slot.
This option is still
reimbursement because, say it again.
This option's still cheaper than some of the other options that are out there, if that makes sense.
Right.
It's somewhat subsidized.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to understand that. But okay, I think I got it now. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So speaking more generally, I believe that we've gotten ourselves in the weeds a bit here. I'm going to say that this probably is not the right time to take up this amendment. The things that we're discussing could be settled in an MOU. And I think we're really prescriptive. We're responding to a particular need at this time. And the law may not work the same way once those things aren't, the available seats are not there. And private providers have the ability to negotiate an MOU. And so I'm thinking probably we should leave the bill like it is and leave this to the private providers to negotiate. They're very good at it. That's my opinion, and I'm offering it.
Okay, this is also aimed at the slots that are available through the school. So what would your comment be to that?
So go into more detail. When the slot's available in the school, what do you think is going to happen to them? If there's a slot available and it's not used?
Yes.
What are you curing here?
So in other words, the school system may not offer those slots if they don't meet the reimbursement rate, or the tier 1 or tier 2. And again, I don't have a case of discrimination, but I just want to make sure they're all utilized.
Yeah. Okay. I think public schools are going to offer slots. They're going to offer as many slots as they can. But they're not in it for profit, so they don't tend to fall in the same category as private providers who have to watch their bottom line. But I understand your point, but stand there.
Okay. Yeah. If you think it can be addressed in an MOU, I don't have a case. I'm just trying to make sure as many kids get as possible. Maybe we'll look at this again next year.
Madam Chair, with your permission, could we just check in with Alistair on that, on the balance between the MOUs with public
Certainly.
and providers?
So I think all parties, the County Board of Education and the private providers and the State Department of Education are all jointly joined together in the MOU. So it's negotiated between all three. I do think there may, this part of the blueprint has just recently come online and there may still be some kinks to be worked out. But I think making major changes might delay the working out of those kinks to a degree. But it's up to the subcommittees if that is their intent.
So I'll just add in that I appreciate Delegate Hornberger, you raising the issue, and I think there's good intentions here, but I do feel like there's a number of moving pieces, and including we're not quite sure, is this an issue and kind of where the need is or where there might be capacity. So I might suggest that this might be, something for us to all work on over the interim and perhaps come back next year.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the indulgence. So if I could, was that the last set of amendments? We want to move favorable on the bill?
It was. And so, we can vote on your amendment or you can withdraw it, whatever you would like.
No, I've declined the amendment and then move favorable on the bill as amended.
I second.
Okay, so now we're on the bill as amended. It has been properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions? And again, this was amended with just the committee amendments. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the bill as amended, please raise your hand or say aye. Anyone wish to be recorded in opposition or abstaining? I think that was unanimous. All right, well, thank you all. HB 770 passes. That ends the work of the Early Childhood Subcommittee. So my subcommittee members can leave this meeting and they're going to continue the live stream, and this will just be an education meeting from here on.
Very exciting if you guys want to stay, but we won't let you vote. Thanks very much, Madam Chair, for your indulgence, and thanks for letting us use your Zoom stream. Okay, so what do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to try to finish in time for your meeting, Delegate Patterson, but if we don't, I think we're going to be okay. We're not doing anything too controversial here. We'll start with the harder bill just in case. That is, we heard this yesterday. Delegate Kaufman had House Bill 1237, which had to do with changing, the bill authorizes a court to award reasonable attorney's fees and related costs, including expert witness fees and costs, to a parent of a child with a disability if the parent prevails in a proceeding that is held to resolve disputes about the identification, evaluation, or education placements of children with disabilities, or the provision of a free and appropriate education. Okay, there's a couple caveats. Such an award may not be made after date written, but those are details. Generally, if they win, the court costs, as was discussed yesterday, are already reversed, but some of their other costs associated with the trial could fall to the losing party, which would probably be the school system in this case. Open that for discussion. Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Chair. I think after yesterday's discussion, I'm supporting this. I think the cost actually is bearable for the system, right? So I'm supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you for your
I
comment.
move.
Yeah, you want to move the bill? Go ahead. We don't
Yeah,
have any
I
amendments
move.
on it.
I move.
Okay, so we have a commentary and a motion on the bill. Do I have a second on the bill?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion on the bill at this time? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of the bill as it was presented yesterday, raise your hands, please. I see one, two, I see two hands on one screen, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, everybody's there. Okay, so it's unanimous, and we will pass that bill on to committee for a vote. The other bill is a local bill, House Bill 432. This is a bill from Prince George's County, which has a letter of support from them. Real quickly, Alistair, just give people a few of the details so they know what they're voting on.
So the bills that came in, the way Prince George's County's school system works is they create a search committee to select their county superintendent, which is currently called the chief executive officer. So this just, the bills that came in had some details of who made up that search committee.
Yeah. For example, it used to be 2 of 3 had to be from Prince George's County. Now they all have to be from Prince George's County. Change the name of the CEO to also to be superintendent, right? Or is that the other one? That's
Sorry, that's the amendments.
They have a couple. Okay, so there's an amendment that does that as well. So let's take up the amendment. The amendment change is the only part of the amendment, also to be clear, changes the name of the person who runs the school system.
I move.
Second.
Sorry.
Is that what it does, Alistair? Is that what it does?
It does that, and also details who appoints the members of the search committee.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, raise your hand, please. Thank you. And now on the bill as amended.
Move favorable on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Delegate Hornberger. Do I have a second? Moved and properly seconded. All in favor of the Prince George's County bill as amended, raise your hands, please. Thank you. We're done. We do have another Prince George's County bill to do, but it's a little more complicated. And Alistair and I need to sort it out a little bit. So keep your ear to the ground. We may be going back. Meanwhile, thank you all for being such polite people in early childhood, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.